Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enterprise Dish, where it's an all Ohio show today. With we got Rick up in Columbus, and I'm down in Cincinnati. How's it going, Rick?
Hey, it's going great. It looks like you made it back. You're in the basement, I can see. I saw earlier in the week you were taking naps at Disney. You didn't really have much going on in Orlando, I take it.
Yes, I was down there. That was quite the day because we got up at let's see, that day started at about 3:30 in the morning, and we had to take a connection from Cincinnati to Orlando because my wife and kid came down on miles, and it was half the price. So we flew through Atlanta, and then we got delayed and all that stuff. And my wife and kid are in shopping, and I laid down on that little brick thing, and then somebody honked their horn, and dude, I about rolled off of that thing. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Nice, nice. I think that, yeah, I deal with, it's funny. You and I both, sometimes when you travel, sometimes you have nonstop, sometimes you don't, and I love talking to like people who live in like really good air service markets, like or London, and they'll complain like, "Oh, the queue to get through is just so bad," And I'm like, "Look, you can fly anywhere in the world, no issue. 8 choices a day, nonstop every time. I will get you the world's tiniest violin and play the sympathy song for you. So drop it." So I love having that conversation with people.
Yeah, you haven't lived until you've had to run through Atlanta from A to T to try to catch a flight.
T to F.
Or T to F. I can never remember if A is close to T. It's
like a weird hex alphabet. It's crazy.
It is nuts. Yeah, I was in Orlando last week, this week actually. It was earlier this week. Geez, I'm all off, and I'm headed to New York next week. Microsoft had their Ignite conference, a lot going on. But one of the big announcements out of this thing, Rick, was that Windows Server 2019 is going to ship next month, and it's always a popular topic about upgrading because everyone's in different cycles. And so what is your... so Microsoft's going to ship this next month. I can't imagine too many people are going to install it. But when you start saying, okay, Windows Server 2019 is coming out next month, what goes through your mind when you start thinking about upgrading?
Well, I think you have to look at the big picture because, yes, Windows Server 2019 is coming out. It's kind of like a car now, right? It comes out a few months before the actual year. But, a lot of people don't know that, I don't know exactly what month, but at some point in 2020, Windows Server 2008 R2 is going off of extended support, right? So I am actually in my head combining those two motions. And if I am an IT pro today, right now, that is actually my cue to get modernizing, right? So that's what goes through my head because you have this warning shot. You've got a new platform and a soon-to-be deprecated platform. Now, most IT pros I know do not just mount the ISO and say, go and upgrade, right? It's a heck of a lot more difficult than that, which is why we've got quite a bit of time to do it. So, my practical advice is to identify what it's going to take to get there, and it will take some time. And I think also SQL 2008 is going to drop off as well. So we're going into a platform shift, right? So I look at 2019 server as okay, that's the next one. That's what I'm going to work on migrating to. I'm going to be putting it in the lab. I'm going to be testing it. What we do at Veeam here, I got to make sure we can back it up. I got to make sure we can install upon it. And then everything comes into play, right? How do you manage it? How do you make it available? What apps can you do on it that you want to do now, especially things that are maybe quite old? File servers might be the easiest ones to move, but real complicated implementations, it's a different story. And actually, I'll throw one thing out there. I actually bet that a lot of people haven't given much thought about this, but Active Directory, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people are holding on to 2008 R2 domain controllers or the functional level of the domain controller of a newer OS stuck there, right? So all these things need to be thought about, and I actually look at this as, yes, okay, 2019 is new. There's a great write-up on Cloud Blogs, Microsoft.com. You can find plenty of places for it. But there's, if I had to put it in 4 categories, right, there's a lot of HCI logic. There's application platform capability, security, and ready for the hybrid approach with Azure. So all of that being said, it's got new capabilities, and they don't really highlight what's deprecated. That's on every one of us who implement stuff to then go look and see what will work, what won't, etc. And I actually take the latest and greatest kind of in conjunction with, what's going to drop off. So probably a different perspective to like
Sure.
a new platform, but I think it's very important. It's the time to think about it right now as well.
Yeah, especially as you pointed out, most people, hedging here who are on 2008 are likely going to go to 2019. I mean, why would you go to anything else at that point? Which also means that they probably haven't updated their server OS in a major capacity in about a decade. And so this is going to be one of those things where planning is going to be paramount, testing and retesting. And I think even though everybody likes to say they test enough, I don't think you can ever test too many times, especially if you haven't updated the server OS in a decade.
Well, I don't think necessarily people haven't upgraded in a decade. I just think if they don't have a reason to upgrade,
Fair point.
they don't. So I think if you took a snapshot in the data center, you'll see 2012, 2016, 2008 R2, right? What you don't want to be in the business of is being a museum of operating systems.
Ooh.
Okay. So we don't want to see 2003s, which, a couple years ago, that was the other pressure right around. I think that was in conjunction with 2012 R2 when 2003 dropped off. So they weren't necessarily like a window, but they had an overlap, right? Where, okay, one's coming and the other one's falling off. And you got to think about it that way. You want to leapfrog of sorts. Like if 2008 is dropping off, I do not want to then just move it to 2012. It very well may be. There might be capabilities that stopped in 2016, so maybe I go there. And then on a longer term, I think about application migration or longer term reconfiguration, et cetera. So the testing part of it is the hard part. I'll be completely transparent, right? That's the stuff that takes time that nobody has to do. So in fact, just this morning, I wrote an email to my team. We're going to put out some practical tips on that, how Veeam can help organizations do that testing, right? Our data lab capability is really something that is part of the solution that we feel, and we're going to partner with Microsoft and take that to the market pretty strongly in the early part of next year, late part of this year.
Yeah, definitely keep me informed on that. Fun fact about this podcast, our most popular episode ever, Rick, actually was when they announced Server 2019. We had many more multiple thousands of people listening to that particular episode than any other one. So there's definitely a lot to talk about there. And actually, at Ignite, there were sessions on Server 2019, and as much as Microsoft likes to say, "Hey, everybody in the world should be running cloud," every single session when I walk by, they were all standing room only.
I wouldn't doubt it. You think about, I don't know what the right word. I need a word stronger than platform. It's like the blood or the DNA of the data center. Really. The cloud, Azure, and the Windows operating system, especially in the server space. I mean, that is that is so critical, and it affects everything, right? If I look at what Veeam does, we run on Windows. Okay, so it's a priority here. I look at your critical apps that a lot of people run. They probably can run on Windows as well, right? So it's that common denominator, lack of a better word, because every organization is going to be dealing with that. And you'll have these common denominators pop up in a lot of ways. Now, of course, we'll get into specializations where maybe I'm a Windows Server admin, or I'm an identity management professional, or I focus on user experience with things like OneDrive and Office 365, et cetera. But they all kind of touch Windows, and those other kind of segments don't always necessarily touch anything else so consistently. So that's not at all surprising. They probably could quadruple the room capacity and do those sessions 3 and 4 times, and it still would be standing room only and most popular replay, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's I'm going to be curious to see how that continues to evolve, because this is going to be it's a release. First off, I always joke when Microsoft tells me, says, yeah, we have 2 versions of Windows Server. We have the long-term servicing channel, which is Server 2019, and then we do have some customers in the semi-annual channel who are updating server OSs twice a year. And I always smirk when I say, are any of those people outside of Redmond? Because I don't know of anybody who wants to just go in there and tinker with the server OS for the reasons you exactly pointed out. That if you screw up that, it not only takes down that server, but it takes down everything running on top of it, and your whole org goes offline. Uh-oh. You lost audio. Oh, there you go. You're good.
Sorry about that. I did try to mute because Brad and I tried a new arrangement here. I'm on the Surface. Usually I'm like over here on the PC, but I'm on the Surface because I don't have the big headset and the audio runs off of the TV, so I didn't want the, the audio coming back around. Sorry about that.
All good.
No, I think there are going to be organizations that are into the cloud model aggressively. You could take an organization who has a pretty aggressive DevOps or CI/CD type of operation. They may be that, but the other thing is that's not the bulk of their business, right? This is like saying 98% of the world uses Hyper-V. Well, that's because they all have Windows, of course, it's there, right? Things like that. You could say many customers or a large number are on the more frequent, the semi-annual path because they might have a small DevOps group, right? And so in that space, they may kind of go to that model, whether it be cloud model, CI/CD, and then for those types of personas, which do not necessarily, for many organizations, represent the bulk of their IT practice, but it's a pocket, right? And that pocket does embrace that model. So, and if you dissect enterprise IT today, those types of groups, and by the way, I say enterprise and DevOps to CI/CD, in the small organization, this can be one individual charged with being that forward leader, right? It doesn't have to be an enterprise experience only. But what I see is that organizations who have that, there's an incredible amount of cross-learning that gets pollinated down that may not necessarily make the rest of the IT group be full-blown DevOps, CI/CD, but they do benefit and they do have some learnings, and they might be just even that much more agile for their next challenge. So good stuff kind of comes out of the organizations who embrace as such. Yeah.
And I'm sure we could talk about Server 2019 a lot, and we will actually more than likely next month when things start coming online. But kicking gears here a little bit over to, I don't know, maybe Rick's one of favorite things or least favorite things, depending on his viewpoint here, are outages. Because this past month has been, in the month of September specifically, has been an interesting one. Slack, which is kind of, I wouldn't even say up and coming. They're expected to be $7 billion in valuation when they go public sometime next year, has been offline a significant amount, which is a communication lifeblood for a lot of people. And more significantly, especially for the Microsoft fans, a lightning storm took down one of their data centers because it got too hot and everything, and there was no proper, well, I should say there wasn't improper failover, but their failover failed. And it knocked off a bunch of their stuff. What do you, when things like this happen and an outage occurs, what's your gut reaction, or what do you do?
Well, what do? I advise people to plan for outages. They do happen. And the conversation becomes very difficult in the cloud model, in the SaaS model, and on the on-premises model, right? So a lot of people think that if I go to a cloud model, especially with the hyperscalers, so Azure, Amazon, et cetera, my availability issues from a keep the lights on and keep the room cool perspective go away. We have evidence that does not happen. However, the long-term tracker of Azure availability probably is better than what I would do on my own.
Sure.
Okay, same for Amazon. The web service space like Slack. And then, by the way, the solution there is to build services that are ready for multi-region, multi-cloud. And I realize that's a big ask. It's a cost multiplier, and it's hard to do. And some apps don't work that way, but that is a solution. Now, and then on top of that, then you have a calculated risk of when I can't have like something stretched available across clouds or across regions. Then you have a question of, well, what is it going to take for me to use the other side, meaning fail over, whether I've built a solution or there's an off-the-shelf solution. Same thing on premises, right? When the model changes, like when the location and how things are run changes, like on premises versus in the cloud, some of the same problems still happen. And this one I'll highlight in particular, DR, on-prem. One of the things that organizations struggle with is who makes the decision to fail it over? Like, yes, let's push that button. That's actually a really hard organizational thing. A lot of times companies kind of struggle with, well, I don't know, do we really want to do it? I don't know. That usually stems from a lack of confidence in the process. But again, if you think about how that lives in the cloud, do we have a confidence in how we've architected it? And those same challenges come up, right? So when you think about the cloud side of it, it's kind of like football, all right? So let's go for a football analogy here.
I'm in.
All right, so a lot of times, what people want to do is pass the ball down the field.
Yeah.
Right? What IT organizations want to do is pass the ball down the field and run the apps and put on a show, right? IT runs the business. But you can't pass what if you can't block, right? So if you can't block, you can't pass. Meaning if you can't keep the quarterback available, meaning defend against everything that happens, you can't pass. So if I can't have robust DR that'll block and cover the passer, I can't put on the show, right? Because blitzes happen, lightning strikes happen. This is I did not plan this, Brad, but I'm liking it. But then we'll go one step further, right? You can't block if you can't snap the ball right.
Yep.
Right. So then the logic is, how does an application get born? How does the play get drawn up? Is it ready to accommodate all the different defensive packages? Is your IT operation ready to accommodate an outage, a power failure, an isolated domain of failure, et cetera, et cetera? So that being said, it's a lot like football.
Everyone loves most of our American listeners probably love a good football analogy because we're talking about the hand egg game, not the actual one with your foot.
Yeah, and those who think it's rugby, they get real confused there with those analogies. But then when you think of Slack and other services, for many organizations, Slack, I think, officially aligns more to shadow IT. I hate to say it. That's the case in my group. But it does save us having what I would call non-essential communication just litter our email. Okay, so there's good and bad with Slack. I yet to think that Slack is mission critical. So if anything, if Slack's down, I get a lot more done. That's my perspective.
You're probably not wrong, because for a lot of people it is a distraction. Obviously there's going to be good communications that do happen, but there's a good amount of it that's just one more thing you got to attend to when it's when your notifications light up. So
yeah, well, that's the other thing. Just don't install it on your phone. You're good.
Yeah. Rick, this actually came in from a reader asking for a segment on every show, and as long as we remember to do it, we will. He is new to the IT pro profession, and he said everything is an acronym soup. He said, Brad, I would love it if you guys would spend just a couple minutes each week, maybe taking one acronym and just describing what it means so that the newer listeners of the show and to the industry can just kind of get up to speed. And I thought, you know what? I think that's a perfect idea. So here we are with the first iteration of this. And I know Rick knows what these means, but we have RPO and RTO, which are probably at the heart of what Veeam does every single day.
They are. And let's start with definition. RPO is a recovery point objective. There's probably established definitions out there, but those three words are generally consistently agreed upon. And what this means is this is the amount of time across the time spectrum where data can be recovered. Okay. Now, this does not necessarily mean DR, because it's harder to move a lot of data somewhere else. It might mean something like a backup, but it also might mean kind of out of band things like a storage snapshot or an application level backup. So where I'm going with that is, if I'm an organization that has 2 sites, maybe some stuff in the cloud as well, and I've got a DR site, I could have 4 different types of RPOs. I could have an RPO that's a storage snapshot for the on-premises stuff every hour, every 15 minutes even. And depending on how I'm doing things, like, for example, at Veeam, I could pluck files out of those storage snapshots real easy. But I have nothing but evidence in the form of good case studies at veeam.com that bad things happen to good storage. So you want to have your data somewhere else. So then we look at another recovery point called something like a backup. And a backup of that data would be from production data to somewhere else. And whether that's on premises or in the cloud, Veeam can easily entertain sub 1 hour, daily, every 4 hours. You know, maybe some things need every hour, some things need daily. You know, you got to think about what does the business need. So the expectation, right? So there's the other thing, or the SLA, but it's the expectation of the business. That's the short answer. Then there's another RPO of what does it take to get it off site? And that would be something like a replication. So moving those two on-premises sites, for example, if I have a DR site, maybe I'm good with daily for that. So that recovery point for a DR use case could be daily. And then you could think about an off-site storage. And that's not DR, but that's maybe throwing my backups into the cloud. And I might have a different point there that for those backups, maybe I'm okay with daily as well. But the thought is most of the time when I have to restore data, it's from the most recent backup. So maybe that storage snapshot would apply. Maybe the daily or hourly backup would apply. And then I always want to keep data off-site and in different types of storage and things like that. So that's RPO kind of sliced out 4 different ways in a practical sense. And then RTO is a recovery time objective. And so no matter which one of those RPOs are deployed and thought through, the RTO is the time it takes to use it, or recovery time objective. So I'll give you a specific example. I want to restore a file. In this world, that should be quick. That should be minutes max. I want to restore a virtual machine. In this world today, that actually is an expectation that can be sorted out in minutes also. But if I want to fail over to the DR site, right, what's the time for that? Now, specifically, if I have a replicated virtual machine, that by itself can spin up in just minutes. But if you think about a comprehensive set of DR, that realistically, including like the process to agree to fail over with the business and then to be ready to go, you could be hours. 2 hours is kind of what I'm thinking in my head, to turn on everything in a DR situation, right? But for recovery time on premises for just the daily disasters of files, a minute, should be where it should be. But then the more important thing to note, and kind of like the time for recovery point and the time for recovery time objective, what is the expectation of the business? If they can't live with the amount of potentially lost data from those RPOs, like they can't lose more than 15 minutes of work, or they can't lose a day's worth of work, or they can't tolerate this much time to recover data or recover systems, right? So those are the expectations. And my practical advice for everyone out there is that these problems can be solved with technologies today. It's just a matter of what does it take to change things to make it happen. For example, maybe I want a storage array that has storage snapshots that can give me these capabilities that of 15 minutes, or I've even seen some as little as 5 minutes where I can restore data from that. So, well, maybe I just need to buy a storage array. Well, getting that type of storage array is easy. Getting the money for it's the hard part. And if you're just an IT group in an island, that might be very difficult. But if you go jointly to the business, to the operations people, and say, look, we've agreed that this is what the business needs to be available and run, et cetera. We can solve this with some technology. And if you get the operations people asking for the money for you, you're going to have a lot easier conversation with your finance team.
No, that is the fruit of the tree right there. Definitely getting your money's worth out of RPO and RTO descriptions. I mean, that's honestly all very helpful, and I'm sure it's going to help out a few people. Rick, before we shut it down here, you got anything else on the agenda? Last time I think we talked about bike riding. How's everything else going for you?
Still bike riding. Yep, I had a good July. Okay, August. I'm trying to rebound in September. I don't think I'm going to crack my 731 or whatever miles it was for July.
Oh wow!
I didn't have any Veeam travel. That really helped. But this month I just got back from Detroit yesterday, and then I was in India the first part of the month. Had a great time in India. That was a first for me. It's kind of funny. So the dish segment here will be on Indian food. And a lot of people don't really like Indian food. And I'm convinced that they just haven't tried the right Indian food. I have for a long time been a complete Indian food like nuthead. I mean, I make my own garam masala, and
Oh, wow.
some of my Indian friends are like, "You're more Indian than my mom," you know, because like she doesn't even do that, you know. So garam masala has like 24 or so different ingredients. It's a spice to then make your curry, to then make your whatever, your chicken dish, your vegetable dish, or whatever. So I'm convinced that Indian food is something that, especially for like North American people, they don't always get their curry on. You know, there's so many different types. There's so many different localities in India. I mean, you know, a lot of people think like curry and rice and maybe some meats and stuff like that. But then there's some, in fact, if anybody's thinking about being vegetarian, there's an incredible option of vegetarian food or even vegan food for that matter with incredible flavor and very filling in the Indian food segment. You know, like South Indian Udupi cuisine to northern like curries and sauces and, you know, from like Delhi and the like. It's all amazing. I can't quite cook it all. You know, I don't really have the sambar recipe just yet, but curries, naan bread, basmati rice. I could rock all dal. I can cook a lot of that different stuff. And so it was so nice to go to the origin of it all. And I didn't have any surprises. You know, it's not like, you know, a lot of people say, well, Mexican food in Mexico is so different and Chinese is so different. I didn't have that there. It was exactly where I thought it would be, consistent even to how I cook. There's, you know, a lot of YouTube people that teach you how to cook there. So if you're getting in a food rut, try some Indian food. That's the recommendation.
Very cool, Rick. And what's the best way for people to find you? Slipping over my own tongue here.
Oh, I'm getting you hungry. You had peaches.
I am actually.
Like, you know, no, Peaches can find me on Twitter at Rick Vanover, and people can partake as well.
Well, as always, Rick, we very much appreciate your time. We know you're a traveling and busy and bike riding man for that matter. And we'll catch you back here next month. And everybody else, you can always find out more at petri.com, or you can find us all on Twitter. And have yourselves a wonderful week, and we'll catch you next time on the Enterprise Dish.